Yeah. About what?
New home? Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Morning, guys. If everybody will put their name and organization in the chat just for attendance sake, that would help us a great deal. Thank you. And Casey Brown, are you going to share the agenda in minutes or do you need me to?
Oh, if you don't mind doing it, I would appreciate that if you have the ability. We'll give everybody a minute and another minute or two to jump on and we'll go ahead and get started.
please.
Casey, I totally had you muted. I'm so sorry. Will you repeat what you just said? I was wondering, I could see you talking. I'm like, maybe he doesn't realize he's on mute, but I had you on mute.
No, I was just saying thank you for being able to share that, and we'll give everybody another minute or two before we jump in and get started. And again, and as people are joining us, if you can sign into the chat for attendance record, that would be extremely helpful for all of us.
I just want to point out that the agenda on the screen is not the same agenda that was sent out this morning.
Well, let me look. I took it, I thought from the email, maybe I'm wrong. Oh, thank you, Debbie. I must have had the old one open on my thing.
I understand that.
Sometimes my desktop looks like my brain. There's 85 tabs, 14 documents with 3 different versions, if that tells you a lot about me.
All right, in the interest of everybody's extremely valuable time, we'll go ahead and get started. If you have not yet, please sign in the chat for attendance record. Is there anyone with us on the phone that is unable to sign into the chat? Not hearing anybody, we'll go ahead and dive in. The minutes from the July meeting were sent out in an email. Dawn had them on the screen, but apparently they disappeared on us.
I'm putting them back on.
Did anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, alterations, etc. to the July minutes?
I'm first on the agenda.
Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
This is Tucker. I'll go ahead and motion to approve.
Thank you, Tuck. Is there a second?
This is Kelly. I will second.
Thank you, Ms. Pulliam. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Hearing no opposition, motion passes. Thank you, guys. Moving on, we'll go turn things over to Luella Sanders for a KSHC update.
Hi, Casey. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Put
it in this one and it'll work.
Okay. Hopefully you all can hear me as well. I was just going to say a few things as we are eagerly awaiting the notice of funds available from HUD, that it hasn't dropped yet, and surprised about that, but we're continuing to monitor that. And Dawn is, of course, primary on that still as we move forward. There are several of the committees that we're working to support as we're prepping for that. Probably one of the things that folks might be most interested in is the hotel motel program that is that the state coalition operates with funding from ESG. Is going well. We just had passed serving 291 persons this last week in that program. So hopefully we're helping to meet that need as everyone is kind of at capacity and working to help folks that are needing shelter or needing that emergency place to stay for the night. And the good news is that with the eviction moratorium extended even for a brief time, that hopefully will help as well to stem that flow into the need for emergency shelter. The other update I would just say is in order to make sure staff are safe, we too, probably like many of you all, have staff working remotely, but referrals are still made on the website through that link, and staff, even if they're not in the office, they are, everybody is on board and watching those referrals. I think, I know Dawn is on the call, Shanae is, I'm assuming, on the call. I haven't seen her. In case there are questions about and updates on coordinated entries, Shanae may be able to address those. Okay, hearing none. That's it.
Any questions for Luella and the KSHC team? Not hearing any, we'll move on. Membership and nominations did meet. We have some new members to the continuum that were approved at the meeting on Monday. And we also have a new potential candidate for the steering committee. And I made the mistake of not having that one pulled up. Hang on.
You want the screen, Casey?
No, I'll just talk through it because I'm not the best person to explain how wonderful he is, because he actually has relationships with some other folks who can probably do a much better job of hyping him up than I can. We had an approved potential individual to fill a seat by the name of Chad Childs. He comes to us from the Wichita State Community Engagement Institute, and he is a member of their trauma-informed system for system of care for early childhood initiatives. He has worked, Debbie Snap, I believe Debbie's on the call, and Luella have both worked with him previously in some other settings. He's got over 20 years of management and leadership experience in mental and behavioral health care fields. We have a number of open seats on the steering committee, and we were going to put him into one of the open seats that exists if the COC was willing to vote and approve him. And I will let Debbie and Luella explain probably better than I just did how they feel about Mr. Childs if they're willing.
Well, this is Luella. I would just say that I had worked with him on with the Wichita Sedgwick County COC. He has been a member of that for many years, even in a prior position before going to WSU Community Engagement Institute. But especially at Community Engagement Institute has a wealth of resources, and Chad is a really good point person to bring those, to make those available in the work that he does. And so I think it would be a benefit for the steering committee. Debbie, I don't know, you may have some other information to add.
I would just agree with you, Luella. We've worked with him on our work with problem gambling and the Kansas Prevention Collaborative, and we've found him to be just really a good person to work with. You're right, he just has lots and lots of resources, always willing to step in. I think he would be an asset.
So what the Membership and Nominations Committee would be requesting today is that the continuum voting members vote to approve to place him into one of the open seats that is on the steering committee.
This is Debbie Snap, and I would make that motion.
Thank you, Debbie. Is there a second?
This is Beth Waddle. I'll second.
Thank you, Beth. All right. So that we can hopefully avoid an entire roll call vote. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Is there any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. We'll reach out to Mr. Childs and get him on board and up to speed for our next steering committee meeting. I left the entire steering committee off the agenda. Wow, I'm doing great. So real quick while I have it, the steering committee did meet at the end of last month. They're going to be voting on the South Central MOU with the city of Wichita regarding the EHVs. We'll see how that goes. I believe there's some concerns there that we're going to want to talk with Wichita about. Steering committee has approved, and I do have and will be distributing to Luella and Dawn shortly the FYI MOUs that are signed by our DCF partners. So that will be moving forward, in our EHVs for both Lawrence and Southeast Kansas and Pittsburgh are firing up and getting things moving. So steering committee will meet again at the end of this month. And last month, this group decided to send a clarification to the regional office requesting some clarification regarding the CFR for conflict of interest. And at this point in time, unless Luella nods and tells me we've gotten something back, I don't believe we have received an answer back yet. So
Casey, I believe you guys have been recording, and those meetings are being posted if anyone's interested. Dylan, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe I've seen Dylan posting those, just if everyone doesn't have time to sit in on them, but like to be updated or hear.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan, thank you. What'd you say?
Yeah, the steering committee's on the website.
Just
All
so
right.
that everyone knows, the website, Dylan is doing a fabulous job keeping that website updated with those meetings and stuff. They're probably not great for listening, but it is great for information to keep updated on. We have so many moving parts now. Sorry to interrupt you, Casey, but I thought that was important.
you're fine. I looked at the agenda and realized I missed a very big part of it. So Debbie, Joyce, the rest of the steering committee, did I forget anything besides putting it on the agenda?
Good to me.
And Luella just put in the chat that she was going to follow up with HUD on that request again, so we can try to get an answer. So unless anybody has any questions for steering committee or membership or nominations, then we'll jump over to an update from Performance and Compliance Committee with Bree Kirkhart.
Good morning. So since the NOFA hasn't dropped yet, I don't have a lot of updates other than we are just preparing for that to happen. So we've been working on letters of intent for renewal and new projects, and discussing preparing for bonus funds that are coming out. And so we've had the DV committee, a domestic violence ad hoc group, working on reviewing the DV bonus funds questions for the NOFA and kind of talking about some of the data that would come with that and preparing for some of those questions. Performance and Compliance Committee, anything I'm missing?
No, I think the only thing that I would add is that we are working on a threshold document that was started by our previous NOFA committee. In fact, I think there is a lot of work that the previous year's NOFA committee has done that the Performance and Compliance Committee is taking on with some slight tweaking. So historically, we've always said we'll be ahead of the curve. At least this year, we're not behind the curve. We are actually in a great place should the NOFA drop sometime this year. So they're all working really hard to get up to speed. It's a great group. And I think the last few meetings have been highly productive. They've gone through quite a few documents, some great feedback. So thank you, Bree. And I think most of the other committee is on here today as well.
That's what I got, Casey.
All right. Any questions for Bree and the Performance and Compliance Committee? All right, we will jump over to the HMIS update. I'm gonna steal Dylan's spotlight for just a second. The HMIS User Committee will be meeting this afternoon for a brief meeting. I didn't get my homework done that I promised to have you guys this month. I got a little busy with some other things and didn't finish it yet. So the meeting will be abbreviated, but we will be meeting at 1:30. Out of that and the steering committee for the HMIS, we have worked out a schedule for some user training for all of us that will be starting in the fourth quarter of this year. We're still putting some final bits and pieces and nuts and bolts into that one. Other than that, I'll turn it over to Dylan and Dawn and see if they've got anything.
Thank you, Casey. Hey, Don, can you make me the host?
Sorry, guys, there's so many people in these meetings now. It's hard to just find one person, which is great. I remember when we used to have like 25 people on a call. Okay, it's all yours, Dylan.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, mainly what I wanted to do was just last time I talked about been working on these dashboards, and I just wanted to show you guys where we're at with those right now. Okay, so what you're hopefully seeing is our big summary of the balance of state for the CoC for 2021. This data visualization comes your way via Looker, which is something that BitFocus licensed with, so that way we can look more deeply into our data and pull custom reports and that sort of thing. But everything you're seeing here should be live, up to date with what we've entered into this system for all of our active agencies entering in information. And so there are some filters that we have built in here too. So up top here, if we wanted to, we could go and see what last year looks like in the system. And then as you'll see, we've already, despite being only halfway through the year, we've already surpassed the total number of clients that we've helped throughout the CoC. So I think that's something we should all be proud of. But then, so we've got the total clients, households, enrollments. Over here, we have by project type, active enrollments, and then individuals that are housed at exit. And at the bottom of the screen, we go into a little bit more detail on that. Here we have individuals by program. And then here are the details on individuals by exit destination. And for anybody who's exited folks out of the system, you know that there are a variety of options, and unfortunately they're pretty long-winded. So it's kind of hard to get a like a quick idea of what the outcomes were just by looking at it at a glance, but it does give you the information. And then the other one I've been working on is the data quality check. And so I put this together based off the information that we currently have in our data quality standards document. And so here we have missing move-in dates up top. So this is exits in permanent housing without a move-in date, which is actually on the enrollment screen within the system. Here we have timeliness. So that is it in the system, it checks for when the actual information was entered in versus the start date of the program and end date of the program. And so I'm not totally sure. I mean, this is right now we're looking at 2021 in this one. So this should be all 2021 client information. So typically, you know, for last year, I know that timeliness wasn't really something that we could talk about because we were entering in a bunch of historical data. But if folks were still entering in historical data at the beginning of this year, that would also affect what you're seeing here. And so, you know, in our policies and procedures, we try to have 3 days is what we put as a standard back when we came up with those in about a year ago. And so that's something that we're looking at as well as whether or not that's totally realistic, but that's what we have currently. So. And then universal data element errors. These are a lot of the errors that you would see when you're pulling the data quality report or looking through your APR or CAPR. And then this one is a little bit tricky. We have the bed inventory and current enrollment counts. So you see up here, we have the target utilization rates that also come from our policies and procedures. And then kind of where we're at in terms of the beds and enrollments. And so I think for a lot of us, especially depending on the program, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around entering in those bed inventories, you know, especially like just thinking of like rapid rehousing, like when we're setting up these programs. And so I think this is just in general something that we'll need to follow up with programs on, kind of show them where we're at and what should we have in the system for your kind of inventory total. But so what we'd like to do moving forward is later on today, I'm going to get in contact for the HMIS contacts for the agencies. And we have a way in Looker to set up delivering these reports. I think you typically as a PDF, you know, and so I can talk with folks about how often they would like to see these. And then if there are other folks like the steering committee or folks that just aren't, you know, with the agencies or in Clarity that would also be interested in receiving these, you can also reach out to me at dwoods@kshomeless.com and we can make that happen. Do we have any questions? All right, cool.
No,
That's all I
Dylan,
got.
I'd like to piggyback just a few things.
Yeah.
I also try to keep up with Dylan when he's running reports, but that does lead us to some other, you will be seeing some data quality reports. You'll be seeing some feedback from Dylan as we try to tighten up our data. He is going to be focusing on, along with the reports and data quality, some dashboards and report cards so that we all can have a measurement where we're at. We are kind of coming out of that transition window from our being with MacLink to Clarity. I think all the agencies have done a phenomenal job considering we did not do, you know, load the data. We asked everyone to go in and manually do it. And it was a lot of work. It was a little time consuming, a lot of frustration. The great part of that is it really did give us a great data set for a basis. And so now there's just a little bit of cleanup. And then we, as you can see, Dylan is moving towards Looker. I know Casey, Jameson, myself have been looking at what kind of reports, what kind of dashboards to not hinder the agencies, but help. We all want to strengthen together. We also want to strengthen individually. So Dylan has also been working on Clarity renewal training. We're hitting almost a year. I think we actually are past a year, Dylan, with Clarity. I think it was June 1st was 1 year with Clarity. And I think it's been an exceptional year and we're moving into probably a little more proactive instead of reactive year with HMIS. So Dylan already indicated he's going to be reaching out to the agency's contacts. I'd say almost all of the agencies have been fabulous about keeping us updated on staff changes, on HMIS contacts. I think that's kind of become a uniform behavior and contact. I just want to remind everybody as we move forward with the reports and setting up reports for the agencies and just scheduling them based on what they need, keeping us updated as staff. We're also tightening the window of how many licenses we have. So just remember, if you have a staff exit or if you have a staff come on, let us know so we can get updated immediately. That way we can make sure all of the licenses for all of the activities in HMIS are updated. So thank you to Dylan. We've really, his hard work has taken us a few steps further than I think we ever would have hoped to have with Mac. He's jumped into it with both feet and done an exceptional job, and I personally appreciate him doing it, because I don't think anyone would want me to be leading that beautiful overview he just gave. So
Cool, thank you.
Dylan, I just want to add my appreciation for this. I think this is the kind of data we've been, as a former NOFA committee member, we were looking for to kind of figure out how we set, standards and goals and expectations in terms of the funding process. So I really, really appreciate this. And Marcy and I will talk about how often we want it for us, because I think there's a lot of positive use for us internally with this data. So I really appreciate it.
Nice, thank you.
And with these coming out, we've had the discussion. We're not saying anything's wrong. We're saying that, hey, some of this looks odd in the data quality. Some of it could be correct. Dylan and I have already ID'd some spots where it pulled things we did not expect it to pull into the report. So they looked a little off. If you find something that looks off or looks awkward, shoot an email back to us so we can look at it.
Right, and if there's like things that you're interested in seeing too, definitely let me know, because we were kind of just shooting from the hip making those initially. So yeah, just let me know.
All right, any questions for the HMIS crew? Hearing none, we will run down to the next thing on the agenda, which, Dawn, you don't have that up, but I think it's going to be a coordinated entry update if I'm reading mine right.
it is. And Dylan, if you'll make me host again, I will share the agenda. Shanae is busy with some other projects, so she asked me, and please forgive me, not everyone can be Shanae, just to give the update that they are piloting and completing transition age youth and homeless prevention via SPDAT. So that is on the radar for right now. And Dylan, or I'm sorry, KCP, I think, was on here, and Casey Brown, you guys might have additional updates more trustworthy than mine. Okay, maybe not. That's all we have.
That covers it. Kelly, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh yeah, Kelly, I'm sorry. I knew there was somebody else I was missing to put on the spot.
That's okay. No, that was it.
All right. Any questions for the coordinated entry team? All right, hearing none, we'll jump down to our regional coordinator updates. North Central still doesn't have a regional coordinator, or Northwest still doesn't have a regional coordinator. Shanae and Casey Palmatier have been filling in there. Will we have anybody on the call that would have an update from that region? Not hearing anybody, we'll jump over to North Central, which should be Claudette. Is Claudette with us? I'm batting 1,000 so far. Is there anybody from the North Central region that could provide an update? All right. We'll go to the Northeast, where we also don't have a regional coordinator. Do we have anybody from that region that could provide an update? All right, Tucker, don't let me down.
I got you, fam. All right. So Douglas County, we have a regional meeting coming up August 17th. We received some EHVs, and we have basically assigned almost all of those right now. We are currently out of rapid rehousing funds for the entire area because everybody is at capacity, funding, and staff. So yeah, that's what we've got going on in Douglas County.
Thank you, Tucker. All right, East Central, Beth, I believe you are with us.
I am with you. East Central will meet next on the 20th. That's a Friday at 10. We have some new folks in the region that are going to be participating. We're excited to have that. There's some some new things happening in Emporia. So we're working hard to make sure that we have those folks included in these meetings, and that those resources will be available to others in the region. So at this point, we don't plan a master list update before that, but if anybody gets openings or we have people that we need to case conference, then we can sure add that. But at this point, we will meet next on the 20th.
Thank you, Beth. Debbie Snap in the Southwest.
Our next quarterly meeting is scheduled for September 14th at 10 o'clock. And I will let Marcy, if she's on, share what's going on with their monthly meetings.
Our next monthly meeting will be next Tuesday. I know they kind of changed the format last month and I was not here for that one, so I kind of got everything screwed up. I think Casey will, but I think we've got all that figured out. We were having some trouble with, we were exiting a lot of people off of the coordinated entry list for, no contact, or we found out they'd moved into a place or things like that. And none of them were coming off of our coordinated entry list. I'm hoping that's corrected, but that's on my goal today, is to get in there and kind of look at the list again so that we know where we're at for next week. But that's really the only issue we were having is when we exit them any other way besides a move in, they were not coming off the list. So we do that, our list monthly. Right now, we've been talking about maybe switching that up a little bit, but we haven't done it yet. So.
Thank you. South Central is Megan Thompson with us.
Hi, we meet every other month for our meeting, and then on the other months we have coordinated entry. So August is coordinated entry only, August 12th, which is next Thursday at 10. And an update from Prairie View would be we still have openings in our shared living for men and women with severe mental illness. So if anybody has somebody that they need help housing, please let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. Southeast region will meet next Wednesday at 10. We took this week off from coordinated entry because a lot of our providers decided that it was time for vacations. We'll meet again for coordinated entry on Tuesday at 9 with our regional meeting the following day at 10. All of our rapid programs are getting a lot of referrals and a lot of requests for assessments. So it's extraordinarily busy down here. Does anybody have any questions for any of our regional coordinators? I'm going to put out a plea. We still need someone to step into that role in the Northwest and the Northeast. We also have some similar openings on the steering committee for the designated seats there. So if you have anybody that is operating in those regions that has an interest in doing that, have them reach out to Luella, Dawn, or Shanae, and let's try to see if we can get those positions filled. Moving on, we will go to James Chisholm and Maria Boyd for an ESG update.
Thank you, Casey. Good morning, everybody. For ESG this month, we've sent out our grant agreements for the 2021 ESG. Hopefully everybody that submitted an application got a response and got their grant agreements. Those grant agreements are due back to us by August the 12th. If you need more additional time, as I know some city councils or some county commissioners meet different to the timeline, but if you need more time, just submit that through the ESG@kansashousingcorp.org email, and we will respond to that. We are looking at our ESG CV grants. If you have had an ESG CV1 grant, that grant ended at the end of June. If you needed more time to expend those funds, you could submit a request for an extension. We were automatically extending that grant to be consistent with ESG CV2. So hopefully all of our grants will be due by December. If you've expended those funds for CV1, we will do a grant closeout and let you know that that grant is closed out once we review those expenditures. I wanted to reiterate to everybody, if you had ESG fiscal questions about money or funding or payments, make sure you send that to the ESG@kansashousingcorp.org email. That's where Maria and I both, we monitor that. If you had specific program questions, you could send those either directly to Maria or to myself if you need to. I think that's all I have for ESG. I'm not sure if Maria's on the call today, but I don't think she is. Anybody have any questions about ESG? Thank you.
Thank you, James. Moving on, James will going to be put back in the spotlight here because I believe he's the only Kansas Housing Resource Corporation individual on the call, at least that I've seen. Kansas Housing Resource reached out to KSHC. KSHC reached out and borrowed another meeting time with some other providers that was already scheduled for Monday. They are looking, Luella, I'm probably going to let you take point on this conversation, but they're looking for some partners in a new opportunity here. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. There's no guarantee that any of us are actually going to have the answers. But the previous meeting, Luella invited us into with Kansas Housing, Debbie Snap, Joyce Stockham, Joyce Schall, and myself, and a few others were able to participate in. So we will attempt to answer the questions as we know the answers to be. But even we had questions ourselves that we don't know that we get all of the answers ourselves. So Luella, if you wouldn't mind kind of talking through what their request and proposal is, and James, if you can throw in there too, and then we'll have some space for questions.
Thank you, Casey. I'll just preface the original contact and thought process behind it, and then I'll defer to James because he's the expert really on from KHRC in general. The funds that they were requesting information about and how we might work collaboratively or partner with them on is addressing the needs for, especially looking at folks who are being evicted or have been evicted with the end of the eviction moratorium looming. And that was the end of last week. And so as we looked at that and had a discussion about kind of what those needs were, it was really obvious, but by the volume. And they, at that time, they weren't projecting the volume, but knew that it would be the potential for a large number of folks who would be in that process, and that when that eviction ended, that moratorium ended, that those evictions might be implemented even if they hadn't been before, even if they'd gotten an eviction notice, but they were still in their housing. So in anticipation, especially looking at folks who had applied for CARA funds, for the Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance Funds through KHRC. And they were discussing the need for a potential warm handoff for folks that were in that situation and really needing to help, especially folks that may have applied for homeless prevention and for whatever reason, now that hadn't, that homeless prevention now was not, they did not keep them from getting evicted. Either the application, maybe where it was in the process, or the information that wasn't received, or whatever the reason was, that it was not able to utilize that homeless prevention to prevent the eviction. So if a person had the sheriff at the door and now we're leaving, they really felt it was important, and as well as so did we, and I know all the providers on the call, everyone on the call would want to figure out how best to help. So that was really the conversation. And it quickly became evident that this was not an issue that only one organization could fill that need. And so my suggestion was that if Casey would let me, use that time that we already had a few key, some providers at the table, we could at least start that conversation. And that was very helpful to have them join that conversation as well. So several folks from the KHRC were on the call, including James. And as those questions and comments came up in that discussion, that original conversation really changed and evolved, which is a wonderful thing. And just appreciate everybody that was on that call. And then we wanted to bring that back to this group to, again, to inform, but also any questions or thoughts as it continues. Of course, now we have a brief reprieve from that eviction moratorium, but it's still pending. And one of the things we talked about was that it would be really good if we had more planning time. If it had ended on Saturday when anticipated, they would have had expected that an increase to really be felt throughout the homeless service providers by sometime this week. And maybe not Monday, but certainly by midweek. And so while that now is not happened because of the reprieve, we don't want to stop the planning process and continue to move forward on this so that we're prepared and ready to address that need. James, may I just hand off to you then for more information from you all about next steps and what you're seeing now?
Yeah, yes. Thank you, Luella. You did a wonderful job of prefacing what the need is going to be. I'm going to attempt to fill in some of the pieces, and maybe it'll make sense on the programming side. So what we're asking for assistance with is agencies to get advance payments from CARA, to get advance money from CARA, to be able to accept a call from a CARA counselor when they have someone that they've been working with, and for whatever reason, and there's multiple reasons why they didn't get funded, ranging from the payments didn't come in time to the landlord wouldn't accept it after months of negotiation, or they couldn't get specific paperwork uploaded in time. What we're asking agencies to do is to fill out an application to receive funding and advance payments in a anticipation that they'll be getting calls to have individuals to utilize hotel vouchers, rental assistance, and utility payments for individuals that are CARA qualified for the funds that the advance payments will be. So we're not asking you to use any of your existing grant funding or anything like that, but just to accept a call from a CARA counselor when they have somebody that's eligible for CARA funding. And I specifically asked that be done before you get the call. So you would not have to worry about determining eligibility or anything like that from someone who's being transferred from CARA. We're asking that with your established relationships with hotels, motels, with the landlords, that you can assist this individual that's pre-approved for the funding that you would have already received in advance to help these individuals. That's kind of the down and dirty of where the need is.
James, how do agencies sign up to participate in partnership?
We're going to send out an application to all ESG agencies that have been funded. So that makes it easier for our agency to actually fund an agency because we already have some type of active agreement and information on the agency that will be receiving the funds.
Will they be doing that for agencies who are already community partners and helping people with CARA applications?
I believe CSBG is going to be involved in this, so we're trying to expand it to anybody that has a grant with Kansas Housing that you could actually apply to receive some of this funding. So I think that's a yes, Belinda.
James, is there a timeline on this funding?
This funding is we're gonna have this funding till 2025. So there might be a need. And what I was explicitly explained today is that we're looking to use this funding to provide that immediate assistance, but also to do some capacity building with agencies. So if you just wanted to add a case manager in anticipation for this, somebody that could help do what you're doing already and just be standing by to receive these calls, to provide this assistance, that would be great. I think there was a list that came out with where we have applicants in all the counties in Kansas, and we can kind of see where that need might happen. I think that list, Luella, was for applicants that have not been processed yet, but are in that limbo status, I believe. You're muted, Luella.
Yeah, there was a list that came out, and it was the applications that are in process as of 8/2. And at the time, so that everybody knows what kind of numbers we're dealing with, there were 5,900 across the state.
Right.
Thank you. And
How far did that get sent out?
I'm sending it out. Actually, Dawn, you want to shoot it over and I'll share this? Because I just got it this morning.
Because I just sent it to
Yeah, it just
Casey
came
this
out.
morning.
It just came out this morning.
Yeah. But when you see that, and I'm sorry, I was on mute because I had that pulled up to be able to just mention a couple of things. In the balance of state COC, as you look at those counties, and is this on the screen? Yeah, everybody is seeing that. I'm assuming.
I hope.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. I didn't know if it was my screen I was looking at or yours, because that's what I pulled up. You might notice that the 4 out of the 5 top, the counties with the greatest number of those potential requests for information, and it was this list also, Jason Frizzell explained that it also included applicants who were now closed because of maybe they were still lacking some information, and the timeline for providing that had passed and they had closed it, but they could be easily opened again. They did have that, some of that or all of that information established, and that they could quickly do eligibility and can get that information out. But if you look at the top 5, Johnson County was listed as the most with 1,186. Wyandotte was second with 847. Shawnee County 760. Douglas County, though, was the first balance of state county in there, and they are in there with 454 applications that were in process or closed but had been in the process. And then Sedgwick was the 5th at 388. And then many of the counties are in there from the balance of state. I didn't look to see if all 101 counties from the balance of state area was in there, but so many of the counties are in there, which is why in that initial discussion, we were talking about if in those, especially in those smaller counties where you might have that, relationship already with the hotel motels, that it would be, very helpful to have someone in either regional areas possible, but even in different counties within that, if need be or possible.
So Luella, you said this total list is approximately 5,500. So if I take the other COCs out, that leaves 2,000 to 2,500. I'm just doing rough math, you guys. Then what is left should be the balance of state, whether it's all counties or not, right? Was that the amount at about 5,500? Okay.
It was 5,900. Yeah.
Even more. So even anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000.
And the issue. Yes, and I think that the important is what I was trying to get to is one, it's concentrated in balance of state in Douglas County, but there are so many other counties represented, and that as Don just said, the majority of counties are going to be impacted in some way. And so with that, and we already know with oftentimes fewer resources, especially in the more frontier counties, it's really important if we could do as much advanced planning before that need just becomes an urgent need, the better. And okay, so this may be a good place to also just mention when Dylan was giving that update about the numbers served, and he said we'd served quite a bit more this year than compared to last year. I had last week in having this discussion with KHRC had compared where we were after 7 months now of this year, 2 days short of the 7 months. But at that time we had 24.6% more served in the first 7 months of this year than in all of last year throughout the CoC. So those needs are increasing, and it's no surprise when you see this list of the largest county within the balance of state that has applicants pending for homeless prevention, that the Lawrence Douglas County CoC also, according to that data coming out of Clarity and HMIS, had the largest number, the largest increase by a specific county. So while the balance of state CoC saw almost a 25% increase in services provided in the first 7 months compared to last year, Douglas County has seen about 125% increase in the services provided in the first 7 months this year as compared to last year. So if both of those for the full CoC and each of those counties within there, as they have increased to some extent, if that trend continues, or if this exacerbates that already existing trend, it's going to be really important that we expand capacity of existing partners and then potentially include new partners so that we can address these needs.
And what it sounded like the expectation was, as James put, to have a staff that could take the call. James, Luella, and crew, stop me if I screw this up, was that when that call was made, we would be able to take those individuals and get them into a temporary shelter through hotel motel, and then work with them on locating appropriate housing. And then there would be funds available for rental deposit and 3 months rent, I believe was what they said. They did not have to immediately qualify for ESG because this is care of funds, although they may, in which case you'll got a few processes to work through there.
Yeah, I think we want to stick with these calls from CARA just to process the CARA funding. And again, I will stress that you will already have that money because you would be getting these funds in advance. So there would be no hold up with being able to provide the hotel motel voucher. You would already be advanced these payments upon approval of these applications. And I'm going to be doing the grant processing process to approve these and get those funds to the agencies immediately. So you would have these funds already. What I envision is that agencies that have these relationships would be able to do that, or to build these relationships in the community to have a bed standing by if you got a call, or to have that relationship ready if you got a call. And this is different than ESG. Now, what I explained to the CARA folks is that after a period of time where someone's in a hotel or motel voucher, we would want to then engage our existing coordinated entry process because they're not housed in a manner that is expedient, and then they would have to go through the process. So we would be able to use the coordinated entry to open up the process statewide to our normal participants. We can still use CARE funds because they're funded, but we can also use additional funding if needed, if they had to go to additional providers or things like that. But the goal is to get them funded with the CARE funds that you've been advanced, so that would cut down all the red tape and the red flags of anything. You don't have to worry about eligibility, because if you get this call, they're eligible for that CARE funding. Does anybody have any questions? Some of these questions will help me work through the process of developing this program, because we just have the framework, and I'm putting together the intricate parts of it as we speak, I guess.
Hi, James, this is Brenda with Family Promise of Lawrence. Just a question of clarification. So the calls that we would be receiving from CARA, are they of tenants who have been evicted or lost their housing, or
right?
Exclusively.
They would be.
It's not people who are still housed and just haven't gotten their rent assistance yet.
No, they would be. They would not be eligible for their landlord, or the place where they're living would not be expecting a CARE payment, and they would be looking for housing.
For shelter or
to where
housing.
they're right.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
and the thing is, when you get that call, they're eligible for the funding that an agency would already have in advance to getting that call. I want to stress that, because that's the important piece of this. So you would be able to do that immediately without the red tape of having to do eligibility or anything like that in that initial process.
Thank you.
James, could I
Yeah.
ask you a related question? Because I
Sure.
know this is evolving, folks, and until, because this has changed, and there was a couple of things one thing that James said about it being an advance that is kind of changing, evolving. So appreciate that, because the initial concern was, especially for organizations that were smaller, how could you do it on a reimbursement basis? Because that was how it was discussed initially. But my question, James, we also had a conversation about what if an agency was working with a household that's on that list that have applied for homeless prevention. They have not yet, they're facing eviction, but they have not yet been evicted. And the thought was, this is why I wanted you to clarify, was that if in that scenario, that provider could help with homeless prevention in this perspective, getting them connected so that they don't become evicted. Has that changed, or am I not remembering?
I think, Luella, in that scenario, what I'm envisioning is that the CARA counselors have been working with this family to get them stabilized where they are. The calls that we're anticipating we would get would be that fell through. That's not possible.
Okay.
I don't like the doomsday scenario of the sheriffs are at the door, but it would be that this application is not going to go to the CARA application where they're going to be providing that assistance where they're at. So they would need additional housing immediately, with the idea that they can't stay where they're at, and they would need subsequent housing until they can find a rental property that they could move into.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay.
James, I just have one question, and you might have already addressed this, and I apologize if I make you repeat it. What is the amount of funding? You said this is going to be till 2025. Is there an amount per year? Is there one amount that's going to have to cover 5 years of service? Just to set the expectation for the application.
The applicants will be asked to put a budget into the application about what their funding is. We're going to leave this up to the agencies to identify what their needs will be, what their capacity is going to be in order to assist individuals. So we haven't drilled down to it that specific. So we're asking you to put in a project budget and pick the categories that you're going to provide. So we're not asking you to do everything. If you're just going to be able to do the hotel motel vouchers on a list for CARA counselors, they'll have a list based on county and agencies that have signed up for this. They'll be able to pick the agency they want to transfer the call to in that county that's going to provide the services that they said they'll be able to provide. So I don't envision, and I want it to be very clear that I'm not expecting one agency to do everything. I'm expecting when an agency applies, they're going to say, this is what we can do, and this is what we want the advanced funding for. And I was explicitly told today that that could be to do landlord navigation. If you wanted to work in the community to build the capacity to talk to the landlords, to engage them, to offer housing units for any homeless, then that could be done too. So on that application, you're going to say, I need funding to do hotel motel vouchers and landlord engagement. This is what I need to do that. This is the time frame we can do that. And when, even though the funding is going to be to 2025, I'm not sure how short term or long term we want these grants. I'm just thinking about that today, so that's why that's a good question. But I would think that we would have a standard. I would look to do 12 months. But I'll before the application goes out, I'll get back with the team so we can finalize how long we want these grants to go. It could be 6 months, it could be 12 months, but there'll be a time frame on the application about what the funding is going to be for how long.
James. Sorry.
Mercy. Hi.
Yeah, I just, these will all be put in clarity, just like our other ones though, as far as like their hotel stays and that stuff, correct? I just wanted to.
Not initially.
Not initially, okay.
Not initially. So, and that was a good question. I explained this to the CARE team this morning, right before now. I've been on meetings since 7 o'clock this morning, but the initial process will be outside of the regular coordinated entry process because they're coming directly to you from a house situation. You're going to have funding to be paid for to house them under CARE. This is not under homeless funds. It's under their regulations. You can house them. Now, we have to figure out what that time frame is going to be before we want to enter them into the coordinated entry system. And that's something we could do as a continuum to kind of set how long do we want to have people in these vouchers that are being paid for by the CARE program before we say we can help them and we need to expand how we provide services to them. So that's something that we can determine now. I don't want to burden agencies with having to do that initially. I think that would be counterproductive to the funding and the way we do business. But if we need to have a time frame that we need to consider these families or these individuals homeless and then put them into our system because that's what we do anyway. Do we have any thoughts on that?
Well,
I guess what I'm thinking about is the hotel stays mainly. I think it gives us a good place to kind of track at least notes and stuff if you're able to enter them into that hotel stay. Otherwise, I almost feel like you'd have to have kind of a different system to kind of keep track of what you're doing with them. Does that make sense? Like, that's just kind of what's coming to mind.
It does, but in order to use that to track it in clarity, you have to enroll them in a program, and we're not enrolling them in the ESG. We're not enrolling them into a HMIS program. We're just providing the service. So we have to keep them separate until we determine when we're going to add them. And that's what I'm saying. We're not using clarity in the beginning. We can initially, eventually, if we can't provide the services that this family or these individuals need in a timely manner. I hope is everybody understand what I'm trying to say? Because I don't want you to have to do both for okay.
Yes,
One of the questions
James,
go
and
ahead.
I appreciate you saying that because I had very large concerns about.
I read your email, Belinda.
Yeah,
I did.
I had very large concerns about that.
I do too. I don't stay up at night thinking about it, but I have a lot of concerns about, and another one is what Luella talked about is when we're crossing into other continuums, when they have other regulations. This is outside of that, but once we have a period of time where we're unable to, in a timely manner, help homeless individuals or they can be considered homeless, we need to have a timeline when we say, okay, now we have to use our coordinated entry system because we don't want them to go undocumented as far as our system because we still have requirements with HUD to do that. So I think we need to look at what would be the time frame that if we're not seeing any movement with the care funds, even though we have the money, we can't always house people, and we all know that. We need to have a time frame where when we say, okay, we've been working with them for 2 weeks, there's no movement. Now we need to put them in a coordinated entry. Or, I mean, we just need to have some time frame so we can be consistent with how we do that.
James,
James.
oh, go ahead. Somebody else have a question?
Yeah, James, this is Joyce. Did you all have any discussion this morning if a agency is already in an agreement with KHRC for CARA funds from this community action side or something else? Will that agreement just be able to be modified, or will this be an agreement in addition to that?
What I think that will do is if you're already in an existing agreement with KHRC for any funds, you will be able to enter into this other agreement in addition to those.
Yeah, okay.
So what we're looking is that if an agency wants to participate, but they're not funded by KHRC, we'll have to look at subgranting those funds through another agency.
Gotcha.
So because you're already funded, that might be an easier way to add additional funds.
So we
that.
yeah, so if, like you suggested, we have a budget for our funds right now, let's say for salaries. And one of the comments you made that I think would be really helpful is having that one person assigned. We could still use that award for the salaries, and then the direct services could come from this agreement and
Yeah,
kind of write that up like that.
That would be up to you to put that in a project description. That's very good. That's
Great.
kind of what I envision to kind of cut down some of the red tape. We want to make this as easy as possible, and this will be set up like CSBG, where you get the funding and then you report on how you spent the funding. So there will be a budget where you'll predict where you're going to spend it. Well, we all know about these predictions about budgets, and then on a monthly basis, you'll say this is where we did spend the money that we were given.
Perfect. Thank you. Very clear.
Mm-hmm.
James, this is Robert Grissom with the kneecap. I got a question on what kind of documentation you're going to require for them, the expenditures. And I'm talking from a fiscal perspective because I know the government wants, paper trail and an audit trail. And let's see. Well, I'll ask the other one a little bit when it comes back to me.
Yeah, Robert, that's a good question. I think for these expenditures, when it comes to actual expenditures for hotel, motels, or rental assistance, the normal documentation that substantiates that those payments were made. I don't know if you're going to need a lease agreement. I just know that you will need a receipt to a landlord to say that, hey, we paid this month's rent, and you'll have an agreement. And I think they are talking about rental assistance agreements and those type of things. That is something that I'll have to get from CARA about what they'll need to do that. And whatever the requirements are for CARA to do that, that's what we'll need the paperwork to do that. When it comes to staff costs, you will have a breakdown of who the staff is and what their time is going to look like. And you'll just say, we paid this staff member for 40 hours to do this for this week. Whatever documentation that's required for that is what we'll require for the spend down. I mean, to document where the money went on a monthly basis. We're going to try to make this as least cumbersome as possible, but have enough documentation to actually be able to report to the government on what those expenditures were.
The one other thing that I would suggest, James, is that when you get these calls to house people in hotel motels, that maybe KHRC send over to the agency via an email or fax or however,
okay,
authorization and what, so that we can use that from the county perspective.
What we plan to do is have all that information in a folder in SharePoint, and once it's established that contact with that agency is made, whoever's taking that call will get a link to that SharePoint with the file of that documentation that established that person was eligible. So you should have all access to the information for the individual from that call about everything they had that establishes that documentation trail up to that point.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
And could I jump in with one question, James? This is Luella again. You had said it would not be necessary for that to go, or you wouldn't expect that to go through coordinated entry initially, at least. So for right now. But if an organization is already using Clarity, the Homeless Management Information System, and they would like to have a place to securely record that information of those services being provided, wouldn't that be possible? Because you can link a service to a profile without a program enrollment in Clarity. Is that right? And Dylan might also.
You know,
wait.
I think all this is possible, but I am trying my best not to conflate a non-HMIS program with an HMIS system, if at all
Gotcha.
possible. So
Okay,
that's I don't want to do that. We can do it, but I'm gonna say this one word, MacLink. Everybody remember MacLink? That's all I need to say. I mean, we can do it, but I don't want to conflate different programs and requirements because it becomes really hard to do that. So I think we need to establish that if within a certain time frame, if individuals that have been referred from CARA are not, we're not seeing any movement on them not being homeless, then we have to go to our normal processes for our coordinated entry process and getting them on the list and doing that. But we need to establish what that is before we actually do this program, so we can be consistent on how we do that. I'm going to stress that again. We need to be consistent on how we do that, because I'm saying we don't need to do that initially for the CARA calls. Just the CARA calls.
That leads me to my question is there actually, and I'm looking at this from HMIS, you know, with all of these things, and I'm still reflecting back on MacLink and our commitment to a clean and viable system. Is there a benefit to the COC, and I'm going to remove CURA from this, is there a benefit to the COC to have the CURA data included with our data?
That's my question.
Not initially, because you have to imagine you're not getting it now. CARA is served, they spent millions of dollars with CARA. We don't have it now. So we have more of an ability to have that now because we're getting these calls. But we have to have a process that we're able to follow that makes it easier to do. But if we just do it because we want to and not because we thought it out, we'll get into trouble at the end. And I can see Dylan kind of knows why we don't want to mix a non-HMIS program with a HMIS system.
And that's what led to my question is it would make it easier on the agencies, however, committee are, and it would not impact the LSA or any of the reporting for us because it's not a viable. So that was my question. And I just want to make sure I didn't misunderstand.
So for me, I would say at a minimum 7 days, but I would like to see 14 days before we have to put them into coordinated entry. If some agency is helping somebody with CARA money and it's been longer than 14 days to get them housed, I think just as a responsible COC, we want to now expand how we try to house them and not just keep it on that one agency, because if they haven't been able to do it in 2 weeks, we need to enlist other resources to help that family or individual. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. 2 weeks. That gives everybody time to spend CARA money before they have to start doing the other coordinated entry and all that. Is 2 weeks reasonable time to say we can house them? And so within 2 weeks, if somebody has not found a landlord to be able to rent to them, then we probably do need to expand that to our other services.
Hey, James, this is Danny. Just real quick question. I put this in the chat, but is this something that the cities and counties will be applying on behalf of the agencies, or will the agencies be applying directly to you? And then my second question is, will you be doing a nifty webinar or something to kind of introduce this to the agencies so they can kind of get some of those questions answered before the application is submitted?
So second question, I can do a webinar and it'll be just more than me because I'm an ESG guy, not a CARA guy, but I guess I'm a ESG CARA guy now. So yeah, we can do a webinar to do that, and the application will go out to agencies directly. So we'll cut the red tape, but you don't have to go to a city or county. If we have enough information on agencies that are going through city and counties to actually apply independently to be able to do this.
On behalf of the cities and counties, I thank you for that.
You're very welcome, Dan.
James, I have a follow-up question to that then. You mentioned earlier, and I didn't capture it all, for agencies who aren't funded by KHRC, what would that application process look like?
It's going to be a one-page application. It's going to look really simple. Fill it out, submit it, and we're hoping to have these grants signed by the 13th of next week. So we're going to move really fast. We got people that are constantly texting me right now where I'm trying to answer their questions. I'm trying to answer your questions. So we are working on it right now. The thing I'm gonna do this afternoon is do the grant agreement. So to include all the federal stuff in the grant agreements, to do a loans and grants form where I'm gonna have to take this before our large committee, say, here's who applied, here's who we want to say yes to, here's who we want to say no to, here's who we want to give a lot of money, here's who we want to give a little money. So we're trying to get this done as soon as possible. So they're working right now to get an email sent out along with the application, and it's a form stack application where you can do it online, submit it back, and we'll get it and start to review that immediately.
So that should be coming within hours, days, like today or tomorrow, I'm assuming, James, by the way you're referring to. It's going to be pretty quick.
As soon as possible.
Going out the door and pretty quick return.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the things that came up in that initial conversation was that if a provider doesn't have that grant relationship already in place with KHRC, that it might be possible to do a sub-recipient agreement with an agency that does have that relationship. Do you think that may still be a possibility?
So
In answer to that other question.
Yeah, so if you're an agency and you happen to get wind of this, or if you're an agency that's already funded, but you want another agency to provide those services, you can apply on behalf of how you want that to look. So there's potentially a way that we're not going to say no just because we can't figure out how to get an agency money. If an agency is willing to provide the services, we'll try to figure out a way to get that funding to them. So, yeah.
And that was really impressive. I got to say, I appreciated the conversation then, and that has continued to this week, because there is a commitment there to get that distributed broadly in the community where it can do the most good. And so I, applaud you for doing that, and Jason and the whole team over at KHRC. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Joy Stockham, 2 weeks might not be enough time, and that's why seeing how that might be not enough time for one agency, this is not a bad thing. 2 weeks, it'll be a good thing in 2 weeks. Then we open it up to the rest of our COC activities to put them to coordinated entry to say, hey, we're working with them, but does anybody else have any opportunities that they can offer this person? So I hear what you're saying, but I'm just saying 2 weeks as a standard, so we know that anybody that has not had a positive housing opportunity or access in 2 weeks, then we expand and say, okay, now you need to do a VICE for that, to enter them in the coordinated entry so they do get on our list. I think that, I don't think I don't think HUD will be upset at us if we do that, but I think if we go longer than that, they might question, well, then why didn't they get into the homeless system? So I even think 7 days might be better, but you're right. I think 7 days might not be enough time.
Yeah,
But
I think in some areas, some of the, well, if they have that eviction, it's just going to take longer to find a landlord. So, you know, it's just some of our people who have jobs are still taking 3 and 4 months to find a place. They're living in shelters with employment, and it's just the units aren't available. But that's where my thinking was a little longer might be nice. But I get we're rural, that might make a difference. So 2 weeks, 7 days, I'm fine with that. I see from your perspective what you mean.
Okay. And this is similar, but it's kind of off the, I got a call yesterday from, well, I got an email from one of our directors at one of our other divisions in KHRC. There's a hotel motel in Ottawa that wants to work to help people in the community, which is interesting. I haven't called them back yet, but I'm gonna call them back, and I'm gonna have them set up to take direct referrals from probably from the coalition, if they're in Ottawa and Franklin County. And
Hey, James.
Yes.
This is Beth. I would love to talk with you about who that is in there in our region. And I actually just met last week with the mayor of Ottawa and the city manager of Ottawa, and they're interested in doing more about homelessness. So
good.
So that'd be a good connection there.
All right, I'll get with you, and then I don't know if I'm gonna call him first or get with you. I've got so many things I need to do, but I'll make sure I connect with you to do that. That's a great thing.
Hey, and James and Beth, I may be able, I think that's the same gentleman that I also received an email from last week as well, and can kind of send that so that we're all three having the same conversation instead of
I was
three
just gonna say,
separate.
Luella, I was just
Yeah.
looking because I think I also received a contact from that
Yeah.
person as well.
So let's
they're really
make sure
kind.
that we're all in that same discussion instead of separate with this gentleman. Thank you.
So
Perfect. Thank you.
one of the things I also stressed was we're very good at looking at how to get the front door for people with homelessness. We need to figure out how we can expand the knowledge to include more landlords to give us opportunities, because if we just provide emergency access for people to hotels and motels, and we're not expanding the rental situations, it's gonna not look good. Which it's like that now. So we need to figure out how to do that. And I don't have the answer for that, but I know this is something that we can fund through this opportunity, is to how to engage landlords, how to do maybe a statewide landlord engagement initiative or something. We need to do something like that. So any thoughts or any ideas, that would be wonderful.
I'm already working on that, a full landlord engagement. It's been, obviously, it's just needed. You know, none of us are going to be productive if we don't have that. And so our housing navigators actually already established a huge listserv of landlords, and Luella and I are going to work on marketing and engagement, and then follow with phone calls. And actually, we were starting a portal on the website so that the landlords could post their units and location and understand RRH before any of our agencies reach out. So I just think that our success is going to be dependent on that backside piece and that additional supportive. And we are in a unique position as KSHC to have those relationships, build those, and also house the database. So it's a gigantic goal. It's an enormous amount of work. We're in a very rudimentary state. I met with our housing navigator yesterday, and I know Luella and I have it on our calendar for this week to see how to take it. So we are thinking as the collaborative applicant, but as a partner to our communities on how we can assist outside of direct assistance and outside the collaborative applicant. So I'm already thinking.
James, I've got one more question for you on this. As I'm thinking through it, with people being evicted, their stuff that they have. I understand that the landlords has to store it. You know how that goes. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But what about, would this program also pay for a storage unit to put their stuff in, and maybe you know, some type of vehicle to take it to the storage unit?
Yes, I'm I'm trying to find this. We just talked about that this morning. I think Kara would be open to providing funds to do that. I'd have to find the notes for that, but I think they just established that that could happen under Kara. And those are some of the things that we want to, we'll clarify with the grant agreement or with the grant documents of what you can provide under each activity. So one of the things that did come up is storage, and will Kara pay for that? And they just established that it could be under housing stability to do that if somebody's being evicted. But we also know that we have ESG funds that could kind of complement some of these things. And we're trying to figure out when to bring in additional funding and when not to. So we have situations that we don't have those additional needs. Kara can pay for the 3 months rent, the utilities, and I'm not sure how long they can pay for that, but it's probably 3 months also. They can pay for the hotel motel stays until we can get them housed and those type of things. So I'll look to get a clear establishment on those additional services like storage fees, moving costs, landlord incentives if we need them, and those type of things. So we'll try to put that together in the next 3 or 4, 5 or upcoming days when we have those grant agreements ready.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So while we've been talking, I've been taking the gigantic list that Kansas Housing was able to send out, and I'm dividing it out by what counties from what regions already had those applications. When I finish this shortly, I'll send this back to Luella and Dawn. Anybody who wants that information, holler. I'd love to say I can do it, but I can't. I'm out of time. So Dawn and Luella, I'm kind of throwing you two under the bus. That will be available shortly. I got about 20 more counties to get through, and then we'll have everybody in a region.
Happy to help, Casey.
Thank you.
I have a quick question about that list. Will that list that was put up be growing, or are those the final kind of numbers of people that were not helped through Kara in those counties?
That list is what is going on right now, and it's probably changing as we speak. So that I think Luella wanted an idea of what counties had the most applications, and we established during that meeting that we needed to see what is still being processed. So they have the potential to either be successful or unsuccessful. So we just wanted to give you an idea of the volume of applications in what counties. So that list could change. It could have changed by now. So that's not who's not being approved. That's just who's in the processing status in what counties.
They were also very helpful in saying that they were going to look to see if they could find how many of those may already be in the court system for eviction, so that we would have an idea of kind of the imminence of that need to help us better understand what the need is. So yeah, that might be coming too, hopefully.
Does anybody have any more questions for James, Luella? Not hearing any, then I think that takes us to the last thing on our agenda, which would be question of if anybody had any comment, any future things that they would like to have on the agendas. Please send them to me, Dawn, or Luella, and we'll get those added on. always looking for new members of the COC, especially for those in marginalized populations or those that represent our homeless population with lived experience. If you have anybody that is interested, we will always take applications. The applications are housed on the Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition's website. And hearing nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn, and any of the regional experts that know your counties really well that want to help me get this list ciphered the rest of the way through, I'd love for you to hang out for a second. So is there a motion to adjourn?
I motion we adjourn.
Thank you, Joyce. Is there a second?
This is Beth. I second.
Beth seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Hearing none, the meeting is officially adjourned. Anyone who is a regional contact that could tell me what region a particular county comes from is more than welcome to help me hang out and help me get through the rest of this list for a couple of minutes.
Well, Casey, our service area for Catholic Charities is exactly the same thing as the Southwest region.
I know,
We
but
make it easy for you.
well, yeah, except for the list is, I'm looking at the map and the list is in either alphabetical order or by the number of applications. So I'm having to do a lot of back and forth.
Well, if you get me the list, I can figure that out for our region.
I'm almost done with it. I've just got a few
Okay.
more. That's why I was saying if anybody could just claim a region, I can move it real fast.
Casey, I can share something with you too. I don't know if you have access to that zip code thing I put together, but it kind of
Yeah, it's not
goes
done
from
by
county to regions and all that stuff. Do you have
I
that?
can hang out
Yeah,
if you
but
need
it's
me
not-
to, Casey.
It's not done by zip code. It's just done by county, and either our map or their map has some things that aren't necessarily spelled the same.
Well, I got counties on here too. Let me just share it with you anyways. In case
Who's
it's
got
helpful.
Lane? What region is Lane County
That
in?
would be us.
That's us.
Who's us?
Catholic Charities
Southwest.
Southwest.
Leavenworth County.
Northeast region.
Northeast.
And I would love a copy of the Northeast regions list, please. It's Belinda.
Logan.
That's Northwest.
Y'all making this way to hell faster. Marshall.
Northeast.
Meade.
That's Southwest.
Mitchell.
Northeast.
We have it as
No,
North
no,
Central.
sorry, they're North Central, but they're a kneecap covered.
But I'm putting them in,
County, but
I'm
yeah,
putting them by what county regionally they fall in.
Yeah, they're North Central.
Okay.
But I'm wondering if they're already working with one of our CDAs. That's why.
Morton.
Oh,
Southwest.
Nemaha.
Northeast. So if you could send kneecap a copy for the Northeast and the North Central regions, that would be best.
It's all on one gigantic list. I'm just putting the regions on their own pages.
Oh, okay.
Ness.
Southwest.
You have a massive region, Debbie.
Yes, we do.
That's
A
23
fourth of the
counties.
state.
Norton.
Northwest.
Osborne.
North Central.
I got it as Northwest.
Really?
I've got Northwest too.
It's Northwest on our official coalition map.
Ottawa.
Ottawa so Ottawa's in Franklin County. Is there an Ottawa County?
It's North Central.
There
Yeah,
is
there's
an
not
Ottawa.
a county. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
thank
why I'm double checking. That's why I got everybody double checking me.
Yeah, we're
North
not that
Central.
creative. We got a lot of towns and counties. There's a.
Pawnee,
I think that's Southwest.
Yes, it
It
is.
is
Southwest.
Southwest. Yep.
Phillips,
Northwest.
Potawatomi,
Northeast.
Pratt,
Southwest.
Debbie, I think you might be the winner here. Rollins,
Northwest.
Republic,
North Central.
Yeah.
Riley,
Northeast.
Rooks,
Northwest.
Rush,
Southwest.
Yes, it is.
Russell,
Northwest.
Saline,
North Central.
Scott,
Southwest.
I think you're gonna take the most counties for damn sure, Debbie, but I don't know your numbers are the biggest. Seward,
That'll add to Debbie's.
Yes, it is.
you may just get it out of attrition. Both take both titles. Sheridan,
Northwest. As is Sherman Smith. Those two are Northwest too.
Stafford,
Southwest.
Stevens,
Southwest.
I'm not sure you're not gonna end up with your entire region here, Debbie. Thomas,
Northwest. Trey goes Northwest.
do we have an Atchison County?
Yeah, that's the Northeast region.
Northeast.
Where the hell is it on the map? Oh, there it is.
It's right above Leavenworth.
Right in the cutoff corner.
It's just a really hard one to read when your map is itty bitty.
Oh, yes, but it's one of our busier counties also.
Okay. I need to unhide all of this now. Who on this call wants this directly to them, and I'll just share this with everybody here and then send it to Dawn and Luella at the same time.
I want it.
I do
Okay.
too.
Debbie Snap. Who
Belinda
was I
asked-
to? Belinda.
Mhm.
All right. Dawn, Beth, you want it?
Yeah, just for information's sake.
Anybody else?
Wait a minute. Okay, I was on mute. You never heard me. Okay, so the list who had also asked for it was Debbie, you already got her, Belinda, Joyce Stockham, and Emily.
Joy Stockham, Emily Wagner,
Yeah, they
And
asked in the chat.
and that's where we stand at the moment.
Yep.
Okay. this should be it. The full list is there, and then the regions are divided, and hopefully I didn't screw in, put counties in wrong places, but we're at least going to be closer than we were.
Well, we'll find
Tell
him.
you later.
All right, guys.
Thank you. I'm out of
Thank
here.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you,
Y'all.
Casey, for all your work.
Anytime.